Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first week 2 lecture. In this section, we're going to be talking about the input and output and setting up our code to be able to take in input from the user and output it in new formats. So to go ahead and get started here, what I want to do is make a new package. So I'm going to right click on my source folder inside of my 281, go to new package, and I'm just going to type in week 2. Inside of this week 2 folder, what I'll go ahead and do is create a new class, and I'm just going to call this scanner practice. And again, for our purposes here, just make sure that public static void main is clicked. And we'll notice here that at the very start, we don't really have access to the scanner class because we want to make sure that we're importing it properly. So the way that you can import it is by actually going ahead and using this snippet of code that says import java.util.*. Now, to actually explain what this is doing, Java and util are packages very similar to what we have on the left side over here. And this asterisk is going to go ahead and get all the classes that are inside of these packages. So essentially, they're going to be able to have more classes such as the scanner class that we can use to go ahead and create our code. Now, after we went ahead and imported this, we're actually going to try to create a new scanner object. So the way that we can create a scanner object is by saying scanner with a capital S, and then the variable name of your scanner. This could be anything you want. I'm going to call it my scanner, and I'm going to create it to be a new, and what I want it to be is a new scanner object. And this scanner object is going to have to take in something as an argument inside of here. And what we're going to make it take in is something called system.it. Now let me just go ahead and try to make this a bit easier to see here. Here we go. Sorry about that. Now, after we went ahead and created this scanner object, we're going to want to try to use it in our code. And a way that we can use it inside of our code is to try and get information from the user, what they're typing inside of here. So in Python, it's pretty straightforward. We saw it earlier inside of Python in the previous example of like typing in my input. The way that we can do this inside of Eclipse is to create a new variable. So I'm going to say int user input. And again, user input doesn't need to be that name. That's up to you. And what I'm going to take in is the value of my scanner dot next int. Now you'll see here that my scanner has a ton of access, and you can get really creative with these as well. But for our purposes, we just want to kind of showcase whatever the user's taking in. So I can go ahead and take in a next int, and I'm going to go ahead and close this off. And what I'm going to try to do now is very simply print out what the user typed into us. Now, when I go ahead and try to run my code here, you'll notice that I actually have access to type inside of my console. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to type in 1341. And if I hit enter, you'll see that I get it outputted again. Nothing too crazy, right? So what I can try to do now as well is say something like the user inputted plus stat. And let's try to run our code again. And now we can have access to whatever the user takes in and do something with it. Now, what I can also do here is try to get a bit more creative with what we're using with this. And you can actually go ahead, instead of just printing out whatever it is, you can try to use this in if statements. So you could say if user input is equal to 0, we could say something like user, oops, I'll just put a string, user type 0. Else, if user input is equal to 1, I could say the user typed 1. Else, I could just print out other option. What I could do now is to go ahead and say, hey, when I start up my program, I'm going to type in 0. Great, I get a user type 0. You'll notice here that my code only runs once though, right? So we have this issue where I want to try to keep trying it out, but let's just try to see if each of these options work. If I type in a 1, the user typed 1. And let's just say I type in a 2, I get the other option. So this is kind of already using our scanner to kind of make a pretty interactive program where we say to the user, hey, go ahead and try to do something with this. Now, what I want to go ahead and do is also try to get a bit more creative with what we were using with while loops before, because remember, our while loops are something where a conditional needs to be true for it to keep running. So what I want to show off is a basic format of how you can create an interactive program that keeps running until the user does something to make it stop. So what we can do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a while statement. And what I'm going to type in is while true. Now, what while true means is that this print statement is just going to keep running forever, indefinitely, until we break it manually. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in a 1. And we'll know here, oops, let me see it here. It kind of broke my program. And what I would like to do is, because my while loop is going to be running forever, I need a way to go ahead and stop the while loop from running. So one way that we can do this is to go ahead, let me put this down here, is to go ahead and when we enter into this while statement, we can check our conditionals like normal. And what we want to do is go ahead and prompt the user to type something in again. So what I'll go ahead and do is press play. I could type in a 0. And now you'll see that I have my user type 0, but you'll notice that my application didn't actually end. So you can see here that I can actually type in a 1. You'll notice this looks a little weird because the 1 is coming after it. But now I typed in a 0, and now I can keep going with each of these options. I get other options. So this is essentially a while loop that will keep running, and it will ask the user to constantly input something and then do something with that value. Now, what about trying to break out of this while loop here? Well, what we can do here, oh, you'll notice that I'm just printing. We can make this ln, so we can do print line. Sorry about that. So this might actually look a bit easier for us now. Yeah, now does everyone see how the 1 is beneath it? So now I could say the user typed 0. If I put a 1, the user is typing 1. And then if I put anything else, I have other options pop up in my numbers. Now, let's just say when the user types in a 2, I want to go ahead and exit this program and make sure it ends. So what I'm going to do to make sure I can notice that it exits, I'm going to type out another print statement down here that says exits program. And what I want to do inside of here is I'm going to say after my user input of 1, I will say else if user input is equal to 2, what I'm going to do is this statement called a break. And a break will essentially take us out of whatever else is going on inside this while loop and bring us out of it. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and run my code. If I put in my 1, I get my 1. If I put in the 5 or an 8, I get the other option. And if I put in my 2, I get the exits program. You'll notice it's red and it's not running anymore. So that is taking in string integer practices there. And what I want to go ahead and do is show us a few more options here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and make another class here just to get us some more practice on how to create it. And I'm going to say scanner practice strings because we're going to be taking in some strings here. And what I would like to do is go ahead and import my scanner class like usual. And I'm just going to go ahead and create the same named scanner by copying it over. Now, there's a few inputs there that could go ahead and show us a few more options. And if you would like more practice with how to view these files, there's a few example files, especially in I believe it's called feet inch converter.java. We can take, or excuse me, that's in the practice files for you to take a look at. But what I want to show off is the input of non-numerical data. So we're going to create a new scanner object. And what we're going to go ahead and do is instead of going ahead and declaring an integer that takes in a value, we're going to make a string and it's going to say, let's just say username, and it's going to be equal to myscanner.next. And you'll notice here, you might be saying, okay, well, which one of these do I pick? Well, next goes ahead and we'll see that it actually goes ahead and it takes in a value of, or it returns a value of our string. So this is what .next will be. And just to make sure that this is working all right, what I'm going to go ahead and do is print out my username is, and I'm just going to type out username. So now when I run my code, I could go ahead and say something like hello world. And now you'll see that I get my username is hello. You'll notice the space is actually giving us a little bit of an issue, which we can look at later. But again, if I just type in a big string, like something like test string, it takes it all in there. There's another opportunity to use a different version of this called next line. I believe it is that way. Let's go ahead and try to see if this does anything different for us. You'll see now that the next line goes ahead and it actually takes into spaces and it accounts for the spaces as well. So if you think your user is going to be putting in spaces, then go ahead and try to check if that one's working and so forth. Now, one more thing I want to show off, which is something where we don't want to use an equality symbol with strings because they are a bit different in Java than we think numerical values work as, is let's go ahead and just do another if and else. And again, when we're using strings, what we want to try to use is this thing called dot equals. So if my string dot equals, and what we're going to be trying to check is if it equals another type of string, which is, I'm just going to say test. I'm going to go ahead and print out hello world like so. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is let me comment out this print statement up here. And I want to make sure that I'm equaling this to test. And if I type in test, I get hello world. So I really want everyone to see that the username.string.equals a different string is how we kind of do a string equality check. So instead of saying if string string name dot equals test is the same as saying if this string equals. The reason that we want to use that equals is that the double equality operator doesn't really do us the same areas as the equals does, and it causes a few issues down the road. So we just want to make sure that we're looking out for that. And again, it's just something that later on in courses, if you're doing it earlier, it's not as big of a shift over. We can do an else if as well. Let's just say if username dot equals test1, I can go ahead and print out, let's just say fantastic world. I'm not the most creative. So let's just go ahead and run this now. And then if I type in test, you'll see I get hello world. If I go ahead and type in test1, I get fantastic world. So again, this is very similar to what we did in the integer, but we can go ahead and put it into a while loop and everything as well using this format. And you can see here that you can get very creative with this. So for one of our projects that we'll be trying to do is kind of making like an account area where you take in a user bit of information and then try to output a piece of code that they can use here. Cool. Now, there's one more little portion that I want to take a look at. And in the lecture notes, we taught it is titled as converting strings into numerical data. So what you can do here is using the next line operation. And excuse me, what we can do is use these conversion methods. So again, maybe you're being a software developer and you need to account for a few areas of errors that the user might encounter. One way that we can do this is I'm going to go ahead and make a new class here. And what I'm going to call this is scanner practice conversion. And what I'll go ahead and do is just grab up my usual guys here. Let's go right here. Oops, and I forgot my public static void main string args method. And what I will try to do now is go ahead and take in this scanner, and I'm going to import this package as well. And again, it might, you might have noticed this. I didn't realize this just now. You'll see that when I created this thing, Java actually automatically imported it in for me. And does everyone see here that this is actually different from the util? I'm importing a bunch of other libraries that I'm not using, which is why I'm getting this underscore. If you just want to use a scanner class, you can just do an import like that. Now, let's just say that I'm going ahead and I'm using the scanner, my scanner. Oh, excuse me. I'm trying to read in something from the user. So let's say string username is equal to myscanner.next. And I want to go ahead and print out the username that I get in. So what I'll go ahead and do is type in this, and I'm going to say hello, and then I get my hello back. Pretty straightforward. What happens if I try to type in a few numbers? This is working as well. But what happens if I want to go ahead and try to type in the user age as well? So let's just say string user age is equal to myscanner.next. And let's just go ahead and say, hey, I want to make sure that whatever user age it is, we add a year to it, because just for whatever reason, I need to add a year to it. So what I'm going to say is final user age as an integer. And I equal this to user age plus 5, or excuse me, plus 1 to add to it. Let me try to print this out now as well. And you might have already guessed that this might not work out for me because I went ahead and I have an underscore there. You'll see here that I get this issue, a type mismatch cannot convert from string to int. So what's happening here is that user age is actually a value of string, and we can't really combine a string and an integer. So the way that we can go get around this is to use a few methods that convert it for us. Just to get a bit more specific with this, what I would like to do is to make this a double, because let's just say that I have a 0.0. So what I can do here is I could go ahead and grab this user age and convert it into a double by using double.parse double. And you'll notice that this method .parse double goes ahead and takes in a string of user age. And now you'll also see here that because, I'm creating this as a double, as an integer, so what I'm just going to call this is to make it a double myself. That was my fault. So now I could say here, double final user age is equal to the converted value of user age over to 1. Now, if I go ahead and run this code, I first get my username. So I'm going to say John, and let's just say 23. I go ahead and hit enter. Now we'll see I get the 24.0 outputted. So now we can see here that I have these different variables that I can work with and convert them as well. Awesome. So that's kind of the scanner class. In a few other examples, there's a lot of examples inside of the Java files as well, but it's straightforward enough and it's pretty easy to convert from data.